The Diddy situation has officially reached a turning point, and this time it's not just rumors, speculation, or internet noise. For years, stories circulated quietly in the background. People hinted, people whispered, people warned, but nothing ever seemed to stick. Now that has changed. New legal developments, resurfaced testimonies, and growing reactions from inside the entertainment industry have shifted the entire direction of this story. What once looked like isolated allegations is now beginning to resemble something far more serious and far more organized. Tonight, we're not here to speculate or sensationalize. We're here to break down what changed, why this moment matters, and what could realistically happen next for one of the most powerful figures in modern music history. Because whether this ends in courtrooms or cultural consequences, the impact is already being felt. How power was built. To understand why this situation matters so much, you have to understand who Sean "Diddy" Combs became. For decades, Diddy wasn't just an artist or producer, and he was a gatekeeper. He built an empire that stretched far beyond music, record labels, fashion brands, alcohol partnerships, media platforms. If you wanted access, influence, or credibility in hip-hop and pop culture, being in Diddy's orbit mattered. Artists wanted his approval. Executives respected and sometimes feared his influence. His events were legendary, exclusive, and symbolic of power. But behind the image of luxury, success, and dominance, whispers followed him for years. Former associates described controlling behavior. Artists hinted at exploitation without naming names. Industry insiders quietly suggested that there was something darker beneath the polished surface. For a long time, those whispers never turned into headlines, because power doesn't collapse easily. The allegations, when whispers became documents. Everything shifted when serious allegations were formally brought forward. These were no longer vague online posts or anonymous claims. They became legal filings, named accusers, detailed timelines, specific behavioral patterns. The accusations involved abuse, manipulation, coercion, and control. Not isolated incidents, but long-term dynamics. What made this different wasn't just the severity, it was the consistency. Multiple individuals described experiences that overlapped in unsettling ways. Similar tactics, similar environments, similar emotional pressure. That's the moment the narrative changed. Because when multiple stories align independently, they stop looking like coincidence and start looking like patterns. Almost overnight, Diddy's image shifted from untouchable mogul to potential industry liability. And once that label appears, the machine begins to move. The massive turn, what just changed. Here's where the situation takes a dramatic turn. Recent developments strongly suggest that more witnesses may be cooperating. Law enforcement interest has intensified. Industry insiders are quietly distancing themselves. But what's most revealing isn't what's being announced publicly. It's the silence. People who once defended Diddy are no longer speaking. Brands that once proudly associated with him are stepping back. Former collaborators are avoiding his name altogether. In situations like this, silence doesn't mean neutrality. It often means legal advice has been given. This no longer looks like damage control. This looks like preparation. Preparation for fallout. Preparation for separation. Preparation for possible consequences. Why this moment matters beyond one person. This story isn't just about one man. It's about how power functions inside the entertainment industry. For decades, certain figures were viewed as too big to challenge, too connected, too protected, too influential. But history has shown us something critical. Power doesn't disappear because of one accusation. It cracks when multiple voices speak at once. If these allegations continue gaining traction, the impact won't stop with one individual. It could expose an entire culture that allowed silence, fear, and control to exist unchecked for years. That's why so many people are paying attention now. What happens next? Realistic outcomes. So, what should we realistically expect moving forward? Legally, cases like this move slowly, but public pressure builds fast. Possible outcomes include additional lawsuits, more testimonies surfacing, increased investigative scrutiny, quiet industry separation. Even if criminal charges never materialize, reputational damage at this scale is often irreversible. In today's world, legacy isn't erased by courts alone. It's erased by credibility. And credibility, once fractured, is almost impossible to rebuild. The industry's quiet reaction. What silence means. One of the most overlooked aspects of this entire situation isn't what's being said, it's what isn't. Major artists who once publicly praised Diddy have gone completely silent. No statements, no support, no standing by posts. In Hollywood and the music industry, silence is rarely accidental. It usually means lawyers are involved, risk is being calculated, distance is intentional. Executives understand something the public often doesn't. Association alone can become a liability. That's why interviews are being avoided, appearances are being canceled, projects are quietly disappearing. This isn't cancellation, this is containment, the psychology of power and fear. To understand how situations like this last for decades, you have to understand power dynamics. When one person controls, careers, money access. Fear becomes normalized. Artists depend on approval to survive. Speaking out can mean losing contracts. Being blacklisted, being labeled difficult. That's why stories often surface years later, not because they weren't real before, but because it wasn't safe to speak. And when one person finally does, others realize something powerful. They're no longer alone. That's when fear turns into collective courage. And that's usually when the truth begins to surface. A pattern we've seen before. History tells us this story isn't unique. Powerful figures rarely fall because of one accusation. They fall because of patterns. One voice can be ignored. Two can be doubted. But when stories align across time, places, and people, denial becomes impossible. What's happening now feels like the early stages of that familiar pattern. Long-held rumors resurfacing. Industry silence increasing, public opinion slowly shifting. And once that shift happens, it rarely reverses. The moment everything changed. This story isn't about gossip. It's about accountability, power, and the cost of silence. Whether the truth emerges through courts, culture, or collective memory, moments like this redefine how we view influence in entertainment. And years from now, people may look back and say, this was the moment everything shifted. Before you click away, take a second to think about what stories like this really mean. This isn't just about one celebrity. It's about power, silence, and what happens when influence goes unchecked for years. Accountability doesn't only come from courtrooms, it comes from attention, conversation, and refusing to look away when things get uncomfortable. If you believe powerful figures should be questioned, not protected, share your thoughts in the comments. Keep it respectful, keep it thoughtful. And if you're here for context, not clickbait, for real analysis instead of noise, consider subscribing. This channel follows stories like this as they develop, focusing on patterns, impact, and long-term consequences. Stay informed, stay curious, because moments like this don't just change people, they change eras. Moments like this don't just test a leader's power, they test their ability to change. And sometimes history remembers not the mistake, but how it was handled.